Gonna be here?
As far as I know, I haven't heard otherwise.
But it is 9 o'clock. Should we go ahead and start? You're gonna give him a call? So I gotta call the meeting to order, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it is 9 o'clock, and it is Monday, the 24th. We're here for the budget workshop for 2023. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the preliminary budget overview. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Commissioner. So for the 2023 budget, just some of the highlights that we've got on the board here as well. The preliminary current expense, most of the stuff here is going to be related to current expense, the main operating fund of the county. So for revenues, we've got a $44,492,784,000. That's slightly higher, $222,000 higher than last year's adopted budget. And then expenditures of $44,250,030, and that's just a little bit lower than last year. So we've got a preliminary surplus of $242,000, and that compares to last year's $343,993 that we had. We've got a beginning fund balance in there of $8,330,000. That is the same as last year's beginning fund balance, the budgeted beginning fund balance, but the actual was $8,424,860. We've got an ending fund balance of $4 million budget, same as last year. So for related to some of the commissioner decisions, we currently don't have a road shift in there. We did a $750,000 road shift last year. And then the year before that, there was a $1.2 million road diversion. There was not a 1% levy increase taken last year. And at this point, that is also not in the budget for this year. And then, so property taxes, it starts at $10,323,265. So a pre-shift increase compared to last year is $127,134. And then if you add in the road shift from last year, then last year's number would be $622,000 under last year's at this point. Some of the highlights on the revenue side of things, we've got a budgeted $6,500,000 for our main sales tax of the county collected in the treasurer's office. That compares to $6,100,000 budgeted last year. That we're looking to exceed that this year, so that's good. And then there's a criminal justice local sales tax, first and second 1/10%. We've got that budgeted at $3,250,000 so far this year. That's up just over 250,000, 300,000. Then there's the 0.3% criminal justice funds. That's a transfer in that we do from so we have the debt service fund to pay the 2012 bonds related to the construction of the jail. And we're able to transfer in some money from that in excess of what we use to pay the debt service. And so that's budgeted at $3,480,000 currently compared to $2,835,000. Room and board prisoners, just another kind of major revenue for us, is up slightly from last year, another 24,000, and that's up to 763,953. So the cumulative of all those is an increase of 758,890 from the previous year. So a good start on some of those revenue figures. Related to salaries and benefits, we've got a total prelim budget number of $24,450,458. So that is up $3,225,711 from 2022's adopted number, which did not include, there was a COLA that was ultimately received last year, 3% if memory serves, 2.5 or 3%, I believe. And then there was also an increase, a pretty large increase in medical benefits that the county contributed last year as well. And that wasn't in the adopted budget as well. And so that's why the number it looks so much bigger from one year to the next, is because some of those numbers that weren't ultimately budgeted last year in the adopted budget, but then were given. There is a contingency beginning of $440,000 for this year. That compares to $1,925,795. And there ultimately a lot of that contingency from last year was used for some of those salaries and benefits and medical benefit increases. And so we were able to use a lot of the money that we had set aside for that, where the board was. COLA for this year, okay, the COLA last year was 3%, and then you can see some of the last previous years. This year, that has not been determined. There have been some contracts settled for next year, but for the courthouse and non-bargs and stuff, that has not been decided. And then just some of the highlights as far as requests coming in for this year's budget. There was personnel requests of $693,392, and that includes an addition of 5 FTE, and that is $473,000 of the total. On tab 5, you can see the breakdown of some of those personnel requests. So, as mentioned at the top of tab 5, there's $472,000 for new requests, new positions. There's a assessor position, a prosecutor position, a sheriff position, and then 2 in the corrections office. And then there are a total of another $219,000 in requests is for position regrades, or regrades and reclassifications, and that totals $219,000, and there's 34 of those requests. And some of those are multiple requests for the same position within a department, but there's 34 total FTEs that are being requested to be regraded, reclassified. And then back to this sheet up on the board, just the total other than personnel services, which is, for the most part, that's going to be anything other than salaries and benefits and capital. There's $1.5 million in requests, and then $927,500 in capital requests. And in that same tab, on tab 5, there's a listing, 3 pages in, there's a listing of all the capital requests made, which includes IS. IS had the most requests at $506,500, but there's some requests in facilities, sheriff, corrections. So then I do also have in that tab 5 as well. There's on the second page. There's as far as going back to the COLAs. I do have there is a little presentation on cost of COLA at this point, and a little narrative explaining what that's based on for various rates. And then for miscellaneous funds, so that's all the funds that are not current expense, we've got a total prelim of $105,213,615 for both revenues and expenditures. And I think that's about all I have.
Tim, before you move on, under major revenues, property taxes, fastest growing county in the state, I believe, still. Kind of expected to see a little bit bigger number given new property additions. That's all in there?
There is on tab 3, there's the property tax breakdown right there, which shows,
So I see one sheet on tab 3. Oh, no, 2 sheets. There we go.
yeah, there's an estimated tax collection for 2023, and it shows new construction,
So before we-
570,700.
are you on the first page or the second page in tab 3?
It's the
First page,
first page.
First
That's
page.
right
halfway
here.
down.
Right in the middle of the page.
Okay, new construction estimate.
And about halfway down, there's a new construction estimate for collections, and it's $570,000.
So on the second page in tab 3, item 2, major revenues, that's all included in those numbers?
Correct, this is based off of this sheet here.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So there is no road shift this year.
We haven't determined that yet. They have factored that we will not have a road shift.
Yeah, that's what I
It is
saw
preliminary.
that. I'm sorry.
Commissioner,
Oh,
real quick.
Mr. Davis.
This is just for my education purposes. I've heard the road shift and road diversion being used like interchangeably. Those can be different though. I mean, the road diversion normally is about law protection services and the road, and road shift is normally supposed to be more temporary in nature. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So Tim, just looking at tab 3 again on the second page, item 2, major revenues, property taxes. 2022 adopted, 10,196,000. 2023 preliminary, 10,323,000. Pretty small increase. Smaller increase than the 570,000 on the previous page attributed to new construction. So help me out. What am I missing? Why is our property tax revenue top line only, what is it, 127,000 roughly, more than 2022, when our new construction is 570?
That's a great question. I would have to defer to the assessor's office on the workings of how the.
You had
property taxes is,
570,000 in
yeah.
new construction tax, and you only go up a couple of, 200-300. Okay. I'm sure we'll figure that out in time.
Any other questions?
If you have answers to that, I would say they'd probably.
We have the assessor here, and I think he's able to answer this.
I can clarify some of it for you. The, when you're looking at the actual budget dollars from property tax, we only in our office do the assessment of the values of the property, which actually went from 11,100,000,000 to 13,400,000,000. Now, what you have to, so it increased that much on assessed values. But as far as the money that you're getting off of here, it relates to your specific budget from the previous year. And if you took the 1% or not, that would have raised what you could have collected because we set the levy rates from it. And you would have taken the previous year's new construction money, you would have had that in there. So the difference between those, you end up with a lower levy rate. So if you take the levy rate from year before last, which set your budget for this year, it would be lower than this year's levy, or the previous year, it would be lower than this year. Considerably lower, the levy
Yeah, but
rates.
we should still have last year's, because the 1% is already baked in, as they say, or it's not. So the 2022 number comes forward.
Well, your budget comes forward. The amount of money that you're going to collect off of that will, the levy rates will change. So certainly your budget will be handled.
Well, I understand. This,
Previous year was 285 million in new construction. This year actually turned out to be 568 million.
so on item 2,
Well,
in page 2 of tab 3, where it says major revenues, property taxes, box is highlighted. It's right there on the screen.
Oh.
See where it says property taxes, its box is highlighted, right? So in 2022, the adopted was 10,196, right? Was that with or without the new values? That was with.
I would have assumed that it was with it. We
Have
don't
to
set
be.
those dollars. We only set the assessed values. Those dollars come into play through
Right.
the auditor's
Right,
office.
so what I'm looking at is the 2022 adopted appears to be an all-in number with the 1% and with the new value. And if that assumption is flawed, then that's a different discussion. But that's the baseline I'm working on. So then you go to 2023 and we're up about, less than 300. Is that right? Yeah, so it's 10.2 to 10.3, so it's less than 200.
Yeah,
It's not a big number. And irrespective of what rate we're using, we got 568 million in new value. And even at the 1%, that's 550 to 570,000. So,
well, it'd be less than the one because of the levy rates. They're down around 0.9 something, so it would
Well,
be just
even-
under, but yes.
even if you use 9, that still puts you right around 500,000.
And I don't know where the auditor's office, and I'm not trying to second guess them.
Yeah.
All we did was actually give the assessed values, which went up, like I said, from 11.1 billion to 13.4 on
Sure.
assessed values, which would lower the levy rates this next year.
Well, even if you lower the levy rate, I mean, we both know that the levy rate gets lowered so that we don't exceed the 1% growth per year, assuming we take the 1%, right? As the
Take the 1%, but it also gets divvied out by the whole of the assessment.
Right,
Correct.
exactly. So I think you have to look at the 22 adopted number as an all-in number.
Yeah.
And even with a reduced rate due to the, let's just say, the pie getting larger, it doesn't go down. I've been looking at these for a lot of years. It doesn't go down that much.
And again, all I know is assessed values went up.
Okay,
New construction doubled, and I can give more detail during my period of time on it, but it
Yeah.
doubled. So how those calculations are done through the accountant side of it, I can't speak to that part. I just know how the assessments went up.
Well, let me ask you this. Until that new construction is completed, is it factored in?
It should, we gave them the numbers as far as early preliminary numbers, and we certified last Thursday the actual construction numbers for this year. They were certified Thursday. I don't know if you're working off a 400 and some million on your preliminary numbers, because the preliminary numbers we had was 400 and some million dollars.
Yeah, well, that might be the difference. It says new construction value estimate, and if they're working off of permit values as opposed to completed
No,
construction.
they've got the updated values that we gave them last Thursday, so they're
okay.
operating off of the 568.
Okay, so that's no longer a value estimate.
Right.
We'll cross out estimate.
So I do not know how they would get their numbers off
Okay.
of that. I
Well-
would have, my assumption is the same, Commissioner. I would have thought it would have went up by, close to
Yeah.
$500,000 on that one piece.
Yeah, well, in previous years, we've spent untold hours going through these things line by line by line by line, and I don't care who you are, nobody's good enough to follow, a week or two of hundreds and hundreds of line items. So I've kind of taken to looking at the big numbers, like what's the gross revenue, does it match up with reality? What's the COLA impact, what's the personnel impact, looking at those bigger numbers. And so long as they are checking out, matching up, then, I don't get quite as wrapped up in the individual lines. But when they don't line up, then it's a bit of a concern. So I'm sure as we go through the process, somebody will say, aha, I know what that's from, and we can fix it then.
Yeah, the previous year, of course, was at 285 million. That would have been at about $1.20 something, per thousand.
Sure.
And now we're down to like 90-some cents, so for the 568, because the levy rates went down. So there would be some factoring of it in there.
Yeah. Well, it's 550, I think, even at 9.5 or something,
Yeah,
so,
quite a bit more.
yeah. Okay, good discussion, thanks.
So the number that's, make sure those are,
And it's not like it's 3 million, it's a few hundred thousand, so,
the number that's in the budget right now is the 10,425,787, that's at the bottom of this sheet, minus the 1% increase for 2023, which is 102,522 to give us that 10,323,265.
oh, so you pulled the 1% out, okay.
Correct.
Well, and,
That explains it.
but it's still, even if you pulled the 1% out, it's still the same discussion, because last year's total roll-up was our total, and this year is last year's, maybe plus a 1%, maybe not. You haven't assumed the 1%,
Correct.
right? Okay. Okay, well, that would certainly change the number, but because it's not including the 1%, we're still back to what's the actual new construction value? 568 million. What's the rate? Appears to be about 0.9 or 1. So anyway, like I said, it's not like it's $3 million. I'm fine moving on. I think it'll show itself eventually.
I can get with you to look at last year's and this year's. I can get with you to look at last
All righty, Tim, is that pretty much it?
year's. That is.
Okay. So I guess we'll move down to the next presenter, and that's the assessor, John.
On the screen. I'm assuming this is not for bribery of an elected official, correct? Some of my favorites are in there, though.
I'm not sure what it is they're expecting you to do for us, but I'm interested in hearing.
Idea. Maybe just put me on a sugar high
That could be it.
on there. Cross to the far right then on this one.
And this is on tab 9.
It's tab 9. Yeah, they're not marked on our paper.
Right, which one do I not push? Then just use the top one? Okay, got it.
I keep working.
So under resource accounts, you'll certainly see there's been some changes on what we've brought in versus some year-to-date actuals. Open space, which is bringing land out of that open space current use ag program. With the development that's been going on, we've had a lot more of that property coming out, which
Yeah.
will impact other things, but
Quick question for you.
Yes.
We hear open space and current use used synonymously. Isn't current use the proper title? Reason I ask is because there's,
It is synonymously even with the state used both ways, because it's not what we would refer to as the open, like where people have access to like a beachfront or a public land, things like that. It's not
Well-
that. So it is the current use ag program that was developed in 1970.
so the current use program, as I understand it, includes a lot more than ag lands. There's a whole list of them in the statute.
Yeah, there's forestry land, other things, but in this county, it's ag.
Well, there's other qualifying properties here besides ag too. So what I wanted to get to though, and try to use these meetings to educate myself, and when there's something I've learned, I'd like to share that. So am I incorrect? If I am, please correct me. But my understanding is that we call it current use because it gets taxed at the current use as opposed to what the law normally says, which is tax it at its highest and best use, highest and best value.
Correct. That's why I refer to it as current use ag.
Right. Well, there's other current use categories, though, that are eligible to be taxed at current use as opposed to its highest and best.
There is. We don't have any in this county.
We do, actually. But we can talk about, I used to own some of them, so I can tell you, I know for a fact. But I'm just making a distinction to help people, because sometimes folks get confused between open space and current use, and really it's the difference between its current use being taxed at that versus being taxed under the law at its highest and best use, and sometimes those are very different.
Correct.
And obviously, land that is farmland that's not being farmed is not being used at its highest and best use,
Absolutely.
which is why its unfarmed current use is a lower tax.
Even a lot of the land that is farmed is not being used at its
At
highest
its
and
highest,
best use.
exactly.
Yeah, it's
Right.
being assessed
And-
on what it's currently used for.
Exactly, and just not to get into it too deep, but historic properties are eligible for current use abatement as well. And I think there are 7 or 8 different categories, not just ag and historic.
I made copies. I didn't know if you needed it.
That's different from yours, Tim, or not? The current one she just went and got. Okay. So, correct. And when I'm going to refer to this here would be the ag property coming out
Yeah.
of the
And-
current use program.
And as you just pointed out, open space doesn't mean that it's open to the public or open and unused. It might just be a less than highest and best use, but it still might be in productive ag ground.
It can, and most of that then has to come before the commissioners.
Right.
Not through our office for consideration.
Right, and so all I'm really trying to do here is help everybody get on the same page with the
Right.
terminology, just like road diversion, road shift
Correct.
aren't exactly the same.
So I'll be referring to it as best I can without slipping, current use ag on that, on there. So we have had a lot of those parcels coming out being, long plat, short plat, a lot of development that has gone on, will continue to go on. A lot of have come out recently. One of the things here where we have publications and that, we have very little now, year-to-date, $320. It used to be that the building department would collect certain fees, transfer them to us. Now they just process them through as a revenue themselves, so they don't come to our office on some small, minor little income fees on that. Scrap and junk, that happened to be one of the vehicles that we got rid of that was wrecked. And then one of them was, there was one in here for a vehicle that we had.
2784. To your left.
No, we got more than that. There's a $4,000, $3,700. income on a vehicle that went through the auction.
How long ago was it? It may, if it was,
It was earlier this year.
because this is through, right, that's,
Yeah, it showed in preliminaries, but I'm not seeing it there now. But it was slightly on the revenue side, just a little bit coming in. So where we're showing a decline right there, of course, that one vehicle we sold would offset that, but it will not, it's not going to be an indicator going forward. We just don't have the things to get rid of. So on wages and salaries, year-to-date is not really a good reflection because this is as of June 30th as far as what percentage we would be. I am anticipating the bottom line that because of the shift in our positions, we had individuals that were in the same grade, but now they're like a step 1 or 2, where people that were retiring were to step 7. So we will have a decrease in some of those funds this year. And I'm anticipating that there'll be a turn back to the county of about $80,000 that we won't use out of our payroll budget this year that we'll be turning back in. As far as the increase for office supplies, trying to look here and find the working requested. Where is the total dollar on those? Because we're requesting quite a bit more.
you're requesting
An additional 2,100.
2160, so it would be, the total of it is
47,
4,800.
yeah.
Yeah, see, I'm not seeing that line item, which I had in mind. So supplies have increased anywhere from 30 to 350%. It is just atrocious what supplies have done out there. And we're being required now by the Department of Revenue to actually send out multiple pages on a couple of our mailers where we used to send like 1 or 2 pages. We now have to send out multiple pages of things that are required with the information, especially on the personal property stuff. So that's going to increase. That's the requested adjustment is 2,100 on it. The GIS supplies have gone up, certainly by percentage, really close, $400 on that. Non-baseline equipment, last year was 15,000. We're requesting 7,900 this year, which will take care of, in fact, I thought I had a little less than that in here now, Tom.
It was,
I mean, Tim.
it was 3,300, I believe, that you had in there, but then there was, related to a position, there was a
Oh,
request
because of the
for-
office, the desks and so forth.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, that would clarify that. Yeah, so, yeah, because of a request of one position, there'd be desk, chairs, computer expenses and that, which would be 7,900. Last year it was 15,000. We are increasing, postage is going up tremendously. We've actually had 2 rate increases this year that we've had to work and absorb. We're asking for additional 2,500 on that. Cell phone, no changes. Wireless, no changes. Travel, an increase there. Costs have, again, increased dramatically, plus our increase of staff. The staffing being so many of them brand new for their certification levels, continued certifications require a lot more of the training and a lot more classes, so there's a lot more travel involved on that. Dues and subscriptions, an increase on those. And then down to recording fees. Now, this is a huge increase here, and primarily it's because of that. Last year, we announced to you that they doubled the recording fees, the state did, but our budget didn't get adjusted to that. And you can see already, year-to-date, June 30th, we're at 4,500 because we have to collect it in the form of a fee on, say, the current use ag coming out. We collect that. That money goes up to the treasurer's revenue from, quote, in the treasurer's office, not our office, but yet we then have to pay the recording fee to the auditor's office. So we don't show a revenue, but yet it is a pass-through on that. And you can see how much it's increased from previous years. And I don't don't know what we're doing here, credit card and bank fees. That one, oh no, that's tuition and schooling, sorry. An increase of $1,500 again because of a lot of new staffing and a lot more training and a lot more classes. Plus I've increased the amount of training even for our senior staff. That's one of the things that I believe in is making sure that we provide adequate training and it's going to pay off. It is paying off all the way around.
Are those recording fees a flat rate per recording, or are they tied to the value of the action?
There is a flat rate plus so much per page.
Per page?
So, yeah, there's like an extra $1.50 per
Nothing to do-
page.
Has nothing to do with the value of the recovered tax
No,
or the penalty?
does not. The recovered is,
It's both tax and
as
penalty,
a standard,
isn't it?
it's 7 back years of the difference in what they would have paid under current best use versus the current ag use. So they pay the back 7 years plus the current year plus interest on the back. And that, I might add, that interest doesn't get divided against the other taxing districts. That comes straight to the county.
And what percent interest?
The treasurer has that. Do you know, Nikki, what, is it 12? No. Yeah, the treasurer would know.
Is there a penalty on top of that, or is the?
There can be a penalty if it hadn't been in at least 10 years in the program, there can be a penalty. The lands that we're seeing have been in for many, many, many years in the ag farming community, and so we're not seeing that penalty piece of it. But certainly tremendous on the interest rate. We just had $50-some thousand last week coming out. 20-some thousand of it was interest and fees, things that the county
Well,
got.
interest and rebate of past taxes and so forth. That's
Well,
not
that was
all-
50-some thousand total, but
Right.
20-some thousand of it was the interest rates.
Just the interest?
Yes. That
Not
came
the
to
back
county.
taxes?
No, no.
Okay.
Divided by 7 for the back taxes, right? Divided by 7 for the back taxes, 7 years, right?
Yeah, it goes back 7 plus the
Yep.
current year.
Yep.
Yeah, plus the current
So
year.
8.
So I can't tell you the dollars, but it is hundreds of thousands of dollars we collected this year in the back taxes.
Sure.
Or the treasurer collected, we just passed the information up to them for them to collect it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
significant amount of dollars.
without knowing the interest rate, it's hard to calculate, but you don't know if that's on a 40 acre or 400 acres, so.
Correct.
You know,
And we've had all of that.
sure.
Yeah, we've had 5 acres.
The 20,000 would be a lot on a small parcel, but, you know, on a circle, it
Yeah.
might not be much.
The one of the things that we have started to really try to do is clean up some of the small little acreages that have been under that program that don't qualify for it.
Right.
And so we've actually been removing people from the program that don't qualify because they should not be getting it. That's not what the program was designed for.
Is there a penalty when you remove them and they were in?
Back 7 years plus current year and the
It is.
interest. There is.
20%
Oh, there, you're
we have to,
20?
20, yes.
Yeah, 20% penalty? Okay, if we have to remove them, okay. So, so those are, yeah, she's got to be my encyclopedia here.
That's if you remove them, not them doing it voluntarily.
That's correct.
And is that because they were in the program and they weren't eligible to start with?
No, it's because they wouldn't currently be eligible. For instance, anything under the 20 acres, they're required to give us income documentation to prove that they meet certain financial qualifications off of that property 3 out of 5 years.
Yeah.
So we request it, some people don't give it, some people
So-
don't have it, and at the end of the 5 years, they didn't give us 3, we'll remove.
What I was getting to is who is driving the withdrawal, the government or the property owner? In this
It's
case.
voluntary.
This case,
It's the
it's-
property owner. Go ahead.
So the distinction I was looking at is who's driving the withdrawal? Is it the government or is it the property owner? I just want to make sure that we didn't have a situation where the government was driving the withdrawal and then penalizing the property owner. But it sounds like it's the property owner that is effectively driving the withdrawal by not meeting the criteria.
That would be correct. If they're not meeting the criteria,
Right.
then technically they are responsible to meet it, and all
Right.
we're doing is initiating. So yeah, we're not driving.
I was just making sure the government hadn't changed the rules
Correct.
and then penalized landowners for not meeting the new rules, that's all. They're contracts, so I don't think they can do that anyway.
Yeah, and as long as they're meeting the criteria, you know, and we work with them on that, you know, to try to clarify to them what they need. There's been people selling cherries to like marketplaces and that, but they don't have it broke down on their tax statement. Well, go get us letters from the places buying it, the marketplaces that are buying these, showing us what they paid, and we can then use that as some indication and proof of what they're actually receiving off of their crop. So we'll work with them on it. So,
Chairman,
Yep.
Treasurer's got her hand raised. She may want to
Oh,
invite Ford to
go
come on
ahead,
the
Russ.
record.
If you'll come to the mic, we need it's a public hearing, so everybody's hearing.
I wanted to add to the percent that we're talking about current use. So they pay the same percent that somebody would pay when they're delinquent. So it's 12% on the first year, and it's additional 1% per month. So it would be no different than somebody not paying their taxes for 3 years, whatever that rate would be, except for now it's 7 years. So there's a chart. It's not necessarily a number that's fixed. It's depending on 7 years would be the 7 years worth of interest. So 12% for the first year plus 1% per month additional.
So that
And
adds up quick.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
up quick. It's quite,
Yeah, you get 7 years, and every month after the first year adds another percent. Yeah, it could be really significant. That's why some of the large monies coming in, the current use total amount received from the ag taking it out is one thing, but a big chunk of it usually is interest, which comes to the counties.
Mr. Davidson.
I think it's important to elaborate, especially, you know, because we were talking about this to such detail, that there is educational efforts put on by the county and even the Department of Revenue to inform, this isn't a surprise to most landowners. They were made well aware that they had to keep this, what they needed to do to keep this, to qualify for.
Correct, and we notify them. In addition, anybody coming into the program, or if property is sold, switching to a new owner in the program, every owner has to sign a form that we have making them fully aware of the conditions of staying in the current use program, the current use ag program. And we have everybody that's going on to the title sign that, so they can't say in the future that, well, we didn't know about it. They're well informed.
I thought it just worthwhile to emphasize that there's no gotcha kind of thing out there that people aren't aware.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they got to know when they enter into that open spaces or whatever you want to call it, that if they pull it out early, they're informed of that, correct?
Absolutely, and they
Yep.
sign a form to that effect, and we go over it in detail with them. Now, I can't speak of what it was 5, 6, 8 years, well, more than 6 years ago. Nikki's been here that long, but certainly in that shorter period of time, I can guarantee they've been aware.
I think the only other request you have is the position.
Yeah, so,
Addition and,
if you have that on a certain page for them?
still in tab 9. There's,
Okay.
Two
So I've
different-
got-
two
I
different
actually have
sheets
two-
for-
two requests.
related to positions.
One of the requests is, earlier in the year, the commissioners approved a job description that we brought before you for a statistical analyst appraiser. They still are an appraiser, but they're moved into some statistical analyst, more responsibilities. Currently, those duties have literally fallen on our chief appraiser, which takes her away from being able to handle a lot of the management, the training, the other things. And it just literally is too much of a load for her alone. So this position would help offset a great majority of that. Now, the first year would be definitely a training period of time, so Nikki would be more than involved continually, but a lot on the training part of it. So that position is a grade 16. And so that is a request for that one position there. Literally the 79,000 with all salary and benefits and everything for the year, I'm going to turn that much back in this year anyway from savings. And I will have a continued savings for a while because of the step grades on a lot of the new employees that are replacing previous retired individuals that were maxed out. So It pretty well is going to be an offset on that other than a COLA costs and salary increase, a few things like that for that position. And it is drastically needed. It comes a good year and a half sooner than what I anticipated with the construction growth and the analyzing of the properties that are out there. So I don't know, certainly you can see the dollars. Just a year ago, 285 million in new construction. This year, 568 million in new construction. And I will throw this out to you just so you're fully aware. There was about 1,300 parcels of new construction we couldn't even get to. Now, we made sure that they were all very small, $25,000 or less on permitting. Some of them wouldn't have even increased the assessed value in the property a penny because it might have been a new heat pump, you know, or something like that that wouldn't change the value. Somebody may have put in a tiny little shed that would be on skids and removable, and that wouldn't have changed the value. It wouldn't have been like the one that changed my assessed value this year. I put one on concrete on a pad. So, so we tried to prioritize and only not get to the ones that had the least impact on new construction. So would have the new construction been more? Yeah, it would have been a few million higher. Not a lot, probably less than 10 million higher than what it was. But it still was another 1,300 parcels we could not physically get out to and do by the end of July. So again, this statistical person would also be doing some actual field appraising and statistical work. So it would help fill in from that. And I can say this, next year, new construction should be more. From what we're seeing that's in the works, stuff that's already started, parcels that, I mean, construction that was at a certain percentage of completion by the end of July. We pick up the rest of that percentage next July. As of the end of July, how much got finished. So if it was at 50%, we'll pick up the other 50% if it's completed. Or if it was at 85, we'll pick up the other 15. Plus a lot of them are at zero, and they'll be well into the 50, 80, or 100% completion by next July, and we'll pick those up. So I anticipate it being a lot better. So that would be that position. I don't know if you have any specific questions on that one. This was ran by HR for that statistical analyst position. Now, I will say this. We have a new HR director. She hasn't had a chance to look at this, okay? So should the board say they really want that, I have no problems with that. I haven't had a chance with Sam to go over this. We've had other things we've been working on. Certainly if the money is budgeted and you make it, you know, as a contingent off to the side for her to review and approve, no problem on that. The next position is...
Excuse me, before we move on?
Yes.
A couple of questions. How many, let me ask it differently. What's the overall staffing change in your office in the last year? Have you gone up or down in numbers?
We've gone up in numbers in the last year.
And
okay?
how many have you gone up in the last year?
This whole year or including last year? We've gone up 4.
2022, you've gone up.
Well, we've gone up 3 for this year. And as of, say, the end of last year to the end of this year, it would be 3 increase. There was 1 in the previous budget when I took office that had already been approved. So that would have been 11 people. We now have 14. So it would have been an increase of 3. This would be an increase of 4. And when I came to the commissioners a year ago, not long after I came into office and did the analysis of that, I said literally the office should be operating on 16, but I can get by not having to have 16. But statistically, it absolutely, even a year and a half ago, justified 16 employees. We're just trying to be much more efficient and spend less tax dollars and need less tax dollars, but we still have to get the job done as the county's growing.
Well, somehow, in previous years, they got the job done with a lot smaller staff. I mean, those are just
I can
facts.
tell you it was not completely done. There was a lot of new construction not picked up.
I understand. And,
Okay,
and
so-
you just finished telling us a few minutes ago that you had hundreds of parcels that you didn't get done either, but they were not high value. And
Very minimal impact, the way we did it.
in fact, the value on those wouldn't even cover this position.
No, that's correct.
But those are the ones you didn't get to.
You have to prioritize, and that's what we did.
I understand. If you had this position, you would have gotten to them.
And we'll have a lot more work this next year of big dollars that we want to get to.
And that's where I'm not sure we're on the same page. You're certainly entitled to your opinion. I track these things pretty closely. I'm watching what the market's doing, I'm watching what the cost of money is, and I'm watching what projects are being put on back burners. So, neither one of us really knows. We'll find out next year, but I just have a little different opinion about the growth curve next year than you do.
Any other questions on that position? Okay. The other one is our GIS tech cartographer. We worked with HR to change a position. Has not been brought before the commissioners yet for approval, but it would be for a GIS specialist. It's a broader responsibilities than what's on the cartographer. We actually have one GIS cartographer right now, and I'll tell you that twice in the last 4 months, another county has tried to hire them away, and I've barely hung on to them, and we don't want to lose that position. We have written up that job description. HR has reviewed it. That's why there's yeses all the way down in here. The new HR director has not had an opportunity to review that. I've already spoke to her about reviewing this. Should the commissioners approve the budget monies, then we would still have to come before you for the changing of the position, the creating of the new title, job description, and then moving that person in there. The cost to the county on that one for the year is at $3,900, not related any COLA increases or anything that may be there. So that would be for that position that we're requesting for the year.
I've always viewed this as a remarkably high-value position, given that it's only one deep, and reasonable to me.
So part of to give you a little bit of future insight on what I'm hoping to do there, this position is one that you don't just go out and hire somebody and tell them to start to work. Doesn't happen. So by moving this person into a specialist position, we would still have the tech position titling, and somewhere down the road, probably in about a year, I would be coming and looking to fill that position, for them to work side by side with the specialist, so that when the specialist retires, which would be about the time that tech would be getting trained, because they're looking at about 2 years from now, if everything goes perfect, before they retire on that. So that's kind of my future planning, to try to fill that gap a little bit and get somebody in there working with them.
You already have that tech position approved?
The tech position is what's filled right now. So we'd be moving the person to a specialist, leaving the tech, but not filling it, but leaving the job description.
So I'm looking at this change sheet and says, use this form for compensation changes to an existing position. So you're going to change this position?
It was that way. Since this was submitted, we've reclassified and written new job descriptions that this person would go into at this new rate, at the 17. So that's why I'm saying it would have to be approved by the commissioners between now and January if we were to do that.
So I want to make sure we're saying the same thing. You have one position now.
Correct.
That's this one. And this piece of paper says you want to change it from a grade 16 to a 17. Is that still accurate?
Not this position, the person with the new job description. That's why I said that would have to come before the commissioners before the first of the year to clarify that. Before I met with HR, before we determined the need to maybe move it to a specialist, we were looking at moving this person to a 17 because of what they are doing. It was thought that it would be better to redraft a whole new job description, move them into that, and leave this one at the 16 for future opportunities. So
We don't assign grades to people, we assign grades to positions.
correct.
So this is a position that is currently a 16, and you want to change the grade of this position to a 17. Is there anything else you want to do to this position?
I don't want to change the dollar amounts grade on this position. At that time, we did, but we've since rewritten that. Therefore, that's why I've said, if the commissioners would
position
set the
title-
funds aside, then we will come with a resolution with the correct position.
Maybe you could just walk through this with me. This position title is a GIS tech. Are you
Correct.
planning on changing that?
No, that'll still stay a 16.
Maybe I can help this out. You're going to create a new position,
Correct.
GIS
Specialist.
specialist, but we have to approve it
Yes.
before it can be created.
Well, we've got it written up.
Right.
But it hasn't been reviewed by the new HR manager.
And we've got to approve it before.
You have to approve it
That's right.
and then approve moving this person into that or
Yes.
allowing me to fill it. Correct.
And the
But I
other-
wanted to address the dollar amounts. So yes, the tech would still stay a 16, Commissioner Peck.
But you wouldn't have anybody in the tech position.
Not until you approve the hiring of that person sometime in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got a tech position that's a 16, and this piece of paper is asking us to change it to a grade 17. Is that much still accurate?
That's what this piece of paper says. That
Well,
is
that's what
not
you
my
submitted.
intent.
Okay, well, that's.
When I wrote this, we did not have a specialist job description written up. Therefore, we were going to change this.
That's all well and good, but
Yeah.
that's an aside.
Yeah.
You've got one position, it's a tech, it's a 16, you want to change it to a 17, and you want to change it from a tech to a specialist? Kind of sounds
No,
like it.
I want to change tech to a specialist. The specialist would be a 17. A tech would still stay a 16. A tech would still stay a 16. The specialist would be a 17.
So really, this piece of paper is outdated, and this tech position isn't changing. What
That's-
you're really wanting to do is add a grade 17 specialist position.
That's what I want to do, but it hasn't been reviewed by the new HR manager.
get all that.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah. And I wanted the dollars to be able to be earmarked, set aside for the position. And all of this has come about more recently than when we were submitting budget information and submitting these budget changes. So you'd at least have the dollar amounts in front of you.
When would the tech position be? When would you want that filled?
You mean the specialist? This is a tech. I would want to create the new specialist, get approval from the board, and switch that over January 1 in the new budget.
Well, no, but the tech position that won't be filled right away.
Good year away.
Good year away.
Good year away, so the position we'd still have the description of a tech, but not fill it.
You want to keep this GIS tech at 16,
Yes,
fill it sometime next year, and between now and the end of the year, you want the board to approve another position,
a specialist position,
specialist position at a grade 17.
correct.
So two new positions, or regrading one and adding another one.
Adding the
Top of
job
the-
description,
on top
it
of
may
the
not
three
get
this
filled
year.
next year. I may not even come to the board with the request next year. It might be early the following year. It'd probably be something I would address in the budget.
Or the specialist position.
No, for the tech position. The
Okay.
specialist, the current person in the tech position, I would move January 1 to the specialist position.
Assuming you even have a specialist position January 1.
Assuming you'd approve it.
That's the assumption that keeps
Assuming the
getting made.
commissioners would approve it. So, and if
So-
you don't, then I still have them as a tech at a 16 unless you
Yeah.
allow me to regrade it. So it was just thought much, the afterthought after this was all presented was we still need to keep the tech for a new person coming in. This person is a specialist doing much more. We need definitely to, instead of just changing them to a 17, we need that position a 17.
I get it. I'm just
So,
adding it up.
I
You've
understand.
got three positions, plus you've got this one, plus you'd add another, it'd be like 4 to 5 new positions this year, if it was approved by the end of the year. I got it. I can do my own math on
It isn't
that.
that many people, bodies, it's not that many increased bodies, not this year
Okay.
or next year. It might be the very end of the next year for the following year, one more. Yeah.
So I got one question. Who's on first?
I'm not sure I'm ready to bunt.
He took my question.
Okay, so,
Just to be clear then, this piece of paper that's in here is OBE.
Just use it for dollars for the budget.
The budget impact is still correct, assuming the specialist position was approved and the tech one wasn't filled until 2024. The 2023 budget impact would be correct.
Yes.
yep.
So, the only other thing that I was going to throw out to the commissioners is new data that has come in from the Office of Financial Management. And I think I got it on the back side here. just for information purposes, because I definitely am over my time. Two pages back. So the Office of Financial Management puts forth a lot of different details and a lot of different information. One of the things that they've done is put forth the median household income for all the different counties. I thought I had it right on that sheet. I had it somewhere. And it's projecting that Franklin County will move into the number 4 position in the entire state for median household income. The only counties that will be above Franklin County, and that's projected from the data 2021, that's the closest data they've got. We were in like 8th place in 2020. We're moving to 4th place on median household income. King, Snohomish, Skagit will be in front of us. That's it, out of all counties. Benton County will be like number 8 for median household income. That is going to, currently the legislation that's before being considered, the legislator's looking at is reviewing the disabled veterans, disabled persons, senior citizens tax levels for income. And depending on what they pass, it could raise our seniors and disabled individuals' qualifying income from $44,316 to as high as $59,000 to $63,000 a year income. That will have a huge impact on individuals in this county that will qualify for that. The assessor's office has to administrate it. We take every single year, everybody's is reviewed, all of their income, tax information, and so forth. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's going to be definitely a huge increased workload on those coming in from that. And I'm pretty certain that it is going to pass the legislature. It's got bipartisan support very strongly on a lot of people across the aisle. So. And the fact that our median income has moved so high so fast because of our growth and income coming in.
So John, I got a couple questions. Safety equipment for 3 new vehicles. Are those road, what are we doing there on the new vehicles?
Those, well, one of the vehicles that we ordered that you approved last March, April,
It's safety equipment, though. What's the safety equipment?
that would be for the new vehicles.
Right.
That's safety lights. I'm
Oh.
putting miniature 24-inch light bars on there for when we're on the edge of roads,
Yep.
on county roads, and different places to where a lot of the counties are doing that along with vests for the employees. I've
Yep.
got vests for the employees they wear when they're out in the field. And lights on some of the cars now. We've been able to use some budget funds and get lights on some. So it's a safety factor
Yep.
to try to help prevent something from happening. Will it release us of liability? I'm hoping it prevents anything from happening, therefore you don't have the liability issue. So we're still legally parking, we're still legally doing what we can do, but the more visible we can be when we're along these county roads and side roads and next to a new construction site that you can't get in somewhere and you're parked right there on a kind of the edge, the shoulder, I want the vehicles to be well seen.
Okay.
So that's what that's for.
And then one other question is, I've had a couple elderly ladies that are widows that have told me that the assessor has been to their place and they've looked, as they're looking at it, they said, well, you got a view of the river. Is there a change in valuation for a view of the river on these
There is.
farmlands?
There is, and even if it's a winter view and all the leaves have fallen off the other trees, or if you cut down a tree from your neighbor, or if the neighbor cut it down and you had a view, yeah, it's because it's highest and best use for that, and yes, it can change it.
Okay.
Yeah, it can, straight up. So, now, I can't tell you, we'd have to look at the specific property as to how much it could change it. But it can change it, especially with so much of it out there along the river area and the premium land.
Mr. Davidson.
Just to clarify, more for educational purposes, I'll make it real quick, I know we're over time. this new, the safety equipment makes it very obvious to me that your car's not an ER&R.
No, they're not. We
And
own
so-
all of our own vehicles.
So let me, so what's your total, with the 3 new what's your total fleet size? How many cars do you have?
6.
And that relates to, compared to number of appraisers?
1 less. Yeah, because the appraisers are all in the field at the same time. So instead of ER&R, we do
Oh,
that.
that's reasonable, yeah.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
and we have 1 vehicle that would give us the 7th that is not arrived and may not be arriving because of how Ford is canceling a lot of those back orders. So I'll be bringing that information to commissioners in the future. And we're hoping maybe we can grab 1 or 2 of the cars that the sheriff is relinquishing, which
The
could be
pool.
a great savings. I would prefer to have them to where they're under ours rather than in the pool, that we actually own them, take care of them, manage them, maintain them, because I can do it cheaper. So, on that, I mean, like half the price even for oil changes from having our own public works do it. So,
How do you do that when you have that work done?
what's that?
Where do you have that work done?
We've actually had 3 different places. Currently, Corwin Ford has given us the absolute best prices. They're beating other current ones that this office had used and other offices had used by as much as $30 and $40 for a full, complete service, oil change, lubing, and everything.
So how do you make that selection?
We go find out the prices, and I go with the cheaper if it's giving me equal service and quality.
So do you,
Not a contract, we just, at each interval, each oil change, we make sure that that's the price we're gonna get.
so you just go online and randomly
No,
pick 3
we
and
call and visit
them?
them. We call them and visit them and talk with them. So we've done that with about 5 different businesses, and since we've got brand-new cars from Ford, and for the warranty, I've been trying to keep them being serviced anyway there, to keep good warranty records. I just think that's a smart thing to do for that, and they've been giving us the best pricing, and now they've agreed to take on non-Ford vehicles even for us at that price.
I don't care to talk about a specific business. I'm trying to talk about the process that you use in selecting who's going to provide the service.
Yeah,
And that process you just told me is, you go and look at all the people in the local area that provide that service,
not all, but a handful.
then how many?
Yeah. Like I said, 4 or 5.
Okay.
You know, I mean,
All right.
yeah, I
That's
don't
good.
have the time or the staffing to go to every single place, and I try to keep it in Franklin County versus Benton County.
If you said you were doing them all, I'd have said that's a waste of time. I'm just
Yeah. No, we're
asking
not.
you, what do you do?
Yeah, yeah, ones that they've used in the past, and a couple of newer shops that we've checked out, plus then, since we have brand-new vehicles, Ford has given us a price.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that the county shop does do when they do maintenance is that they periodically do a safety review in accordance to the risk pool. And now that you're taking cars possibly out, you might want to just look at that, John, of in the future, if there's someone that can do an annual assessment of the cars to make sure that they're safety, from a
Yeah,
safety
yeah,
standpoint.
and we could do that. I mean,
Yeah.
there again, with us, brand-new cars, I was
Because
trying
that's
to
done as part
definitely
of the
work
shop
with the new
process.
dealer. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
take a look at that if you could.
Yep.
Okay.
All righty. Any other questions? Thank you, John. Next, we have the treasurer. What's the tab on that one, Tim?
That is tab
23.
23.
23.
No.
Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Davidson, Karen. Before I start, I just want to let you know that our budget hasn't really changed. It's pretty much the same, except for the 2 exceptions of funds, the sales tax, and the investments. With these, we have really looked at these, did our research, and forecasted, and best to our ability. So when we go through this, I'm not really sure how you want to go through this, if you just want to pick out line items and go through them. I'm not really sure I want to go through line by line. I don't know, I'm just going to let you guys decide how you want to do this.
I see Mr. Johnson's ready to speak.
I'll just say, typically, we go through those lines that are
Changed.
significant or changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. The small dollar items, I don't think the board's too concerned about, since those aren't going to be material to balancing the budget.
Okay, so the first line that we have here is the property tax, which was already discussed by the assessor's office. The next one is going to be the sales tax. We're on budget here. I'm going to decide that. For our sales tax.
Yeah, so the sales tax, I mean, we've been exceeding sales tax every single month for the past like 2 years. People that are part of budget committee, they're well aware of that. And so we're kind of, what I did is when we looked at that, we still try to be courteous to the prior years, not just the year that has been increasing a lot. And so we kind of took a 3-year average and tried to forecast where we're going to get here for the next 4 months or whatever we have left of collecting. And based on that, we tried to kind of come up with a little bit more on the conservative side as far as what the revenue we think the sales tax is going to generate. It's still a $400,000 increase from prior year. We're putting it at $6.5 million. We're on pace to even exceed that this year by about $100,000 or $200,000, give or take, depending on the last couple months close out here. So that's probably the biggest one out of what we have going on in our budget. $6.5 million is on the conservative side, but that is kind of what we're on pace for the year and taking the last couple of year averages for the forecast. I don't know if you guys have any questions about that.
Russ, I
This
have,
increase because of online sales?
There is not one answer that fits all for that. We've kind of broke it down and we looked at different trends and stuff. I think one of the biggest points that we've kind of pinpointed to, and this is just, I mean, there's really no way to say for certain, is when COVID happened, because sales tax is generated on point of destination. When COVID happened, we believe that there was a lot of trends and a lot of shopping patterns that changed, where a lot of people increased the amount of online ordering that they were doing. And because of that, a lot of stuff that's getting shipped out to the county, we're actually getting more sales tax than somebody going and buying something at the local Walmart, because that's in the city jurisdiction. So that's when we really saw a lot of the jump. But then just across the state, talking to our counterparts in other counties, they've seen the same increase, give or take. So just the buying pattern in general seems like it's increased quite a bit. We've tried to break it down where we look by industry. It's really not one industry where you could pinpoint and say, okay, everybody's buying a car, so it's the auto industry. The give or take, the rate has gone up across the board, whether it's retail, whether it's construction, whether it's car industry. So there really isn't one answer that could kind of summarize it all, but that's kind of the trends that we've been looking at.
All right, thank you.
So when did we have that change to point of first use taxation, which you call delivery?
So that was always the case where it's point of destination. We just, with COVID, a lot of stores being shut down, a lot of people being home, it seemed like that was the more popular thing in 2020, 2021, where people were just getting stuff shipped to their house. And for whatever reason, and again, there's no way to really say for certain that's what it is. That was kind of the trend that was
I
getting
understand.
talked a lot with other counties.
It used to be that either that wasn't enforced or it wasn't the rule. For example, 10 years ago, you ordered something from Amazon, you didn't see the sales tax automatically come up there. I think it was about 4 years ago, wasn't it, that there was?
It's a little bit longer. I think it was maybe like in 2011 or 12 that it
Okay.
happened.
All right. All right, so that obviously drove up our sales tax revenues too. Do you have any thoughts about the dramatic increase in consumer lending rates and potential impact on purchases for high-dollar equipment, luxury boats, farm equipment, vehicles, automobiles? Do you see any of that impacting those sales? It's just an opinion. I obviously, none of us know.
I would say that mostly, I don't know if we're going to see the impact on the sales tax. People that are going to spend, that have the money, are going to continue to spend. We don't have the COVID monies that are coming in, different things like that, that we did have generated that were given to these people that could spend. I think that where we're going to see it is in our housing prices, in our housing sales, with the mortgage interest.
Yeah, and another thought, again, I do a lot
That'll be
of...
REIT.
Yeah, that would be Reed.
Yeah.
For sales tax, a lot of reading and stuff that I do on that is, the fact that there is such an increase in inflation or just an increase in cost of goods has a direct impact on the amount of sales tax people are paying. And so just because somebody isn't necessarily buying more commodities, the fact that the commodities are so much more expensive has a direct impact on that too. But
Tied
again,
more to expendable income than it is
yeah.
anything else. They
But-
might not buy as much stuff, but they're paying more for it.
Sure, yeah, and it's really hard to pinpoint those. Those are all, I would say, maybe educated guesses, but there's really no way to say, okay, this is the exact trend and this is why it's happening. That's kind of the talked about reasons, but there's really no way to pinpoint that.
Okay, so the next one that we'll go over is the leasehold excise tax.
Josie, before you get there, can I go back
Yes.
real quick to the property tax line? I know we talked a little bit about this at the outset, but if I look at those numbers that are reflected here, that 2023 preliminary budget is almost $1 million lower than the actual experience of the last 2 years.
So you're-
Explain that, why we're showing only $10.3 million in property taxes, when the last 2 years we had 11.2 and 11.3 of actual property tax revenues.
So this is,
There would have been road shifts
yes.
in previous years.
So if you look at the number for property taxes, and that was talked a little bit about with the assessor, the number that's presented doesn't have anything in there, no road shift, no 1%. Every single year, there've been at least some road shift. That road shift number has decreased over the years, but I believe it started at 1.7 million about 3 or 4 years ago, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And then we've took, it was less last year, and then we also did the 1%, I believe, 4 out of 5 years, if I'm correct here. And so the number here that we have on the current budget doesn't include any of that. That's just kind of like the raw number. If you guys add in your road shift and if you add any 1% or any of that stuff, then that number is going to reflect more towards the prior years.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense.
And just for the record, we do have a percent bank too, right? Okay.
Okay, so the leasehold tax excise, that is the ground that is leased to farmers, and we're right on with that. So there, it's basically pretty much the same as last year for collection. The excise local admin fees, that is the percentage of fees that we get from excise. So I just want to clarify here, am I going line by line, or if I'm just hitting the big numbers?
Just change numbers, I think, would be. The PILT isn't listed. Is that because it's not a guaranteed?
It's on there. It got changed under a different revenue line. It used to be under one revenue line. And if you look at the prior years. So it used to be under revenue
The line
line.
below it.
It used to be 332811100. Now it's 332156001. And that was just a accounting correction that we had to do to reflect it more accurately. It's on there, and it's forecasted to be.
Oh, I see.
The 180,000 for the one that I'm assuming you're referring to, because there's two different
Got it.
types.
So the PUD privilege tax, that is the amount that generates from the energy, nuclear, non-nuclear, that we receive.
The answer was
And
backwards.
they've changed the date for receiving that to March. And we're right on schedule, and it all depends if we're having an outage that year or not. The criminal sales, the state, criminal justice state general taxes, it's 0.1%, and it's basically on our population and on our crime. And we've increased that by $75,000. So we're at $975,000 for next year. On 341-42010, it's the excise state admin fee. It's the same as last year. What's that? So, go ahead.
Another big one that probably the second biggest to sales tax is the investment interest that we have, and the number that we have forecasted on that is 325,000. Last year we were only forecasting 40,000, and that's a significant increase, and we've already pretty much outperforming that number in the last 2-3 months. I'm sure everybody's kind of saw what the rates are doing, and so that has a direct impact on what the state pool is doing. It has a direct impact on what we're getting on bonds and different securities and stuff. And so that's a number that we forecasted 325,000 based on kind of what the rates were doing in June and July, and kind of giving it a little bit of a guess, but I don't think anybody could have even anticipated what the rates are doing currently as of today, even to be this high. So that number, it could still be significantly different depending on what the market does going forward.
Right, one of the big factors in the interest we get is a residual balance in other funds that are not investing their cash. As things get, to kind of follow through Commissioner Peck's remarks, when things get tighter and tighter out there, do you see that the districts and things might be ratcheting down the residual funds that you're able to collect interest on?
Yes, that is actually one thing that we just actually talked about last week when we were looking at how much of our funds we want to lock into like securities and as far as buying long-term bonds, because our policy allows us to do, I believe, 40% into like long-term, and even for that purpose we were looking at that, and we decided we won't go over that 10% mark, just for the fact that if some of these districts don't want to keep their money in residual. But to your point, that if some of these districts are not keeping their money in residual, that would definitely decrease the amount of interest that we're receiving. And so that is part of the number that we have forecasted. It is a little bit more, again, on the conservative side, considering what the rates are right now. I think the state pool was at 3 point something just as of last week. And if you take what we have currently at residual, by that rate alone, you will well exceed that 325,000. But that is part of the forecast, or really the guess as what are the districts going to do with their money. And therefore, we're trying to be pretty cautious about how we approach how much money is going to be available in residual to invest to begin with.
So because this can be a larger dollar amount, can I ask, a couple of years ago, Josie, I know firsthand knowledge, you were looking at developing a pool which would not only benefit in some regards these issues, but also give the ability for the county to loan money maybe to some of our small water districts, special purpose districts, and keep the kind of money in-house and kind of thing. Is it just the size of our pool just isn't big enough to warrant the administration of that, the administration cost of it? Or where did you ever, because you never really, I don't know really where you wound up with that.
When we were first looking at it, and then we were considering that, but then the rates went down, and we were trying to get other districts on board, and we didn't have enough of them on board, which, it's not really their idea, but I'm trying to keep a good relationship with them and make sure that they have the money to fall back on. And so I think that's something that we probably need to look at again.
Possibly with the way
With the
rates are going,
going,
and we were at an extraordinarily low time of interest rates for a long period. I don't think we're going to go back to those anytime soon. So it might be something to,
Okay.
Can you tell me where the 1/10, the 1% mental health tax that we just adopted this year shows up? Is that in general sales taxes?
No, there is a separate line for it. It's not in our 101-650. I'm not sure which one that's in.
It's in the 191 fund, the mental health tax fund, mental health fund.
Okay, so it's separately
Separate.
crowned. Okay, thank you.
And I think I estimated that I think we've been getting about almost 250,000 a month from that, so.
Right.
So do you have any more questions on this part of the budget?
Yeah, I do. On the excise state, we went over this, the 1.3%. 1.3%. In 2021, we were at 171,000. In 2022, we dropped to 115 and we're projected this year at 120. Why was it so high in 2021?
So there's a couple of things. So so when somebody sells a house, they do an excise, and the excise is generated from a state rate and a local rate. So prior to 2020 or 2019, somewhere around there, there was a change where they did what's called a graduated rate. So before, the state portion was always 1.28%, and then there was a local portion. And so we got 1.3% of the total dollars collected for the state. Since then, they passed what's called a graduated rate. So that state portion starts at 1.1%, but caps off at 3%. And so it considers the amount the houses are being sold for. In our area, there's a lot more homes that were sold for $400,000 or less, which would give them that 1.1%, decreasing the state portion collected, therefore effectively decreasing the amount we're getting contributed to.
Before we move off this page, just real quick, treasurer fees, who are you serving as treasurer for irrigation districts? Is it just Franklin? That's the only irrigation district? Is there any chance in the next year that might change? They're comfortable with you? I mean, Columbia Basin, of course, and some of the bigger ones are. Is there any change in that relationship that you anticipate? Okay, good.
So for our expenditures, the only thing that we've actually done for expenditures is we have increased our armored car service, and they have increased it from $451.93 to $582. And so everybody that uses armored car brings their monies to my office, and we just have a one fee that services the county. And this is the state contract.
All right, is there any other questions?
I'm sorry, where is the armored car expenses at?
Right there, they've got it highlighted up there. It's,
Okay.
But it's also,
$1,500 increase.
I mean, are we dealing that much cash that,
it's
Oh, yeah.
also right here.
So it's pretty much all the cash that we collect for taxes that we collect, but on top of that, the clerk office brings their deposits, district court brings their deposits, DOL brings their deposits. So all the deposits are done with us, and then the armor car picks it up daily and takes it to the bank.
I'm just surprised that there's that many people paying in cash.
Oh, there's a lot of people that pay in cash their property taxes.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
And especially like probably one of the big, property taxes is a big one, but like if somebody posts bail, a lot of times that's done in cash, and that could be $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 at a time, and they'll bring that to us and deposit that with us. So we definitely don't want to be taking that to the bank ourselves.
Sure.
It's
No, that makes-
basically a safety issue for our office, so we
No.
don't have to deliver it ourselves.
Mr. Davidson, you have a
And the
question?
clerk's
No,
office
I-
too is generating a lot of cash up there, a lot, yeah.
Well, that makes more sense. I mean, as a business owner, over 90% of all of our sales are by debit credit card, so cash is like hardly ever seen anymore.
Well, I think with a credit card, your business maybe absorbs the fee, and where the county, a government cannot absorb the fee, so.
I see.
We would have a lot of happy taxpayers if they would not have to pay that 2.5% on the credit card, probably eliminate 90% of our cash, but when they're paying taxes, $5,000 bill on a
No, that's
2.5%.
totally justifiable. I just was curious because I
And when
was
we're limited
surprised.
to 1% increase in property taxes, accepting 2.5% for collection of property taxes isn't too wide. I mean, till they do something about that, and that's about 70% of our income is, yeah, I understand the taxpayers' concern about that, but the credit card companies need to come down on their fees before we could ever do that. Another thing, to Rocky's point, is you use change services too, right? They're bringing the change here, so the cash is coming from the bank for their change needs.
Do we have 100% insurance coverage of those funds that are given to the courier?
When you submit your risk pool for us for the insurance, we fill that out to justify the amount of money that we take in, and then that is put into that insurance, and it's covered through your office. Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, I just want to know, is it 100% or some percentage thereof?
So when they did the risk pool, they asked for the max amount that ever goes to the bank. So I remember we were looking at the logs, and we provided the max amount that we've had in the last 5 years, and so that's the amount they use plus a little bit, just to kind of have a little buffer. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Risk Pool's very happy that you're taking deposits by armored car as opposed to Sally in the back of her Buick, you know.
Or Russ in the back of his pickup.
And they do ask how much we think is our max deposit, but it doesn't answer the question of how much coverage do we have. You can have $1 million property and insure it for $500,000, and when it burns down, you're only getting $250 because you get half the value and half the policy. So it's a good question, and it's worth just following up to make sure that the risk pool's coverage is 100% of that number we give them.
More questions?
All right, hearing none, thank you very much.
Are we doing O&M?
Can I, one question, Treasurer's O&M, it's here just for, because we voucher through the county or something like that, because there's an actual statutory, there's actual RCW that this isn't subject to the budget. So this is just included, so because it's part of the budget that the vouchers go through?
It's the treasurer's fund, and so, I mean, it can be discussed as much as the board desires. So, I mean, it's included, it's bottom line, and so there's typically not as much discussion on it because it's not the main operating fund of the county, and so it's not as crucial to us, but
Well,
it
there's an
certainly.
actual RCW I can show you
But-
that it says no
yeah.
budget constrained.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Just one other quick question. I'm looking back at that property tax line. It shows 2022 year-to-date actual, $6,024,000. Is it reasonable to say that since that's the first 6 months of the year, that the total for the year will be roughly double that?
So as of today, I have the most current number. That number is 7.1 million at 65% collection. Taxes are due this week. So
I appreciate that, but the question was, if in the first 6 months of the year we collect $6,024,963, is it reasonable to assume that we'll have roughly double that by the end of the year? Why
because you got
not?
about 20% of taxpayers that pay in full, maybe 20 to 25% of taxpayers that pay in full for April.
Great, thank you. I wasn't aware of that.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And Russ, great job knowing the info. Thank you. So next, we'll move down to Human Resources,
It's on tab 25.
tab 25.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Here with my mask, hopefully not offending anybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I looked last week and sat down with Tim for a bit on my budget, and I am not aware of any revisions that Eric made. So that is a bit of a hampering for me, but I do have some comments of additions I would like to make.
Okay.
So number one, I think we need an FML administrator here. It came to my attention that we have a outstanding bill, or an employee does, of $5,000 because FML was not calculated correctly. So I'm talking about FMLA, the Family and Medical Leave thing, which we have to calculate very correctly and accurately. Otherwise, it ends up being a problem for us, and it is a problem for you because there is now an obligation by the employee to pay back $5,000. So what we did in my agency in the past is we hired a company called CareWorks, and we'd go out for an FML or an RFP and basically choose a similar company. They would handle all of the calculation of FML, which my staff definitely would not have a lot of time to do. You don't have a big problem here. We did at the transit. You don't have as big a problem here, but I still recommend that we transition to that. And then the only thing HR would have to do is be the liaison with the employee and also handle the reasonable accommodation piece, which is very small. So I'm asking for $25,000. I guess I should pass this out to you. $25,000 additional for the HR budget. And the second item that I'm asking for is a reclassification and salary survey. I have no idea what this is going to cost. I have reached out to firms like Fox Lawson, to Gallagher, to Siegel. I'm now starting to get responses. And the reason I'm asking for this is in the last week, you cannot imagine the number of requests I've had for reclasses. And also, Eric had about 5 to 10 in his queue. Managers did not update the position description, the job descriptions with corrections, so he couldn't move forward. And there's really no reason to be doing this all year. You want to do it once a year, right before the budget. And so my recommendation is that we budget $200,000. I have no idea what it will cost, hopefully less, and then move forward with that. That would handle all of the step increases. It will handle all the reclasses. And if you want to do a little bit more, we can develop a performance tool as well through the consultant. HR partners very, very closely. We do half the work, really, on those projects. So contracted service, I guess we have a labor person named Kevin. I don't know that person, haven't talked to him, but I think that would be good to keep him until I know what's happening there. You're using the Jackson firm for some legal. I would recommend you move to Summit Law. I've worked with both, and I just think that it would be preferable. Summit Law is probably going to cost a little bit more, but I would recommend that you move from Jackson firm to Summit Law. And the advertising budget, do you recall what that was? Was it 5,000? Yeah. That was
5,000.
shockingly low to me. But you're advertising in like 2 places. I've advertised in 25. So that's the difference. We had a lot of diversity sites in the places I've come from, and they cost money. So the other items, I'm not asking for any personnel in terms of budget. So it would be budget neutral in terms of filling positions. So.
Okay. Questions?
So I just want to be clear, I'm opposed to any reclassifications until the end of the study that I'm proposing that we do.
Okay.
So the 200,000 you mentioned, what's included in that?
So that would be a salary survey, and it would be reclassing all the positions that everybody's coming through my door, and all the ones in the, between now and the end of the study.
But it's not any money to fund any of those changes, just for the study?
Correct.
Okay.
And then basically, there is one exception to that. Tomorrow night, you're going to hear at the board meeting about a hybrid position, if you haven't heard about it already from the county, Benton County, and you, as it relates to juvenile. So basically, and Carly can tell you about that tomorrow, or David. They basically want to take 2 positions. They want to have 1 manager as opposed to 2, and 2 supervisors over in that department. He says it's revenue neutral. I don't know. I can't answer whether it is or not. So I would advocate moving forward with that 1 reclass at this time. And as far as the budgets go, I just want to say this, as far as the budgets for John and all of the others, I'm not opposed to adding it to the budget at all, because once the reclass goes through, you'll have some money to fund the positions with if needed.
How long does it usually take to do a reclassification?
I'd allow 5 to 6 months.
Takes 5 to 6 months.
Oh, yeah. It's basically, you go out for an RFP, and that alone can take 2 to 3. And then the actual study, what will happen is they'll do their analysis. We'll work very closely with them. We'll be reaching out to all the comparables and getting the data. That's what HR does hand in hand with them. They'll give the presentation, and then you move to adopt the changes or not.
And when was the last reclassification survey done? 5 years ago. And how often are they usually done? Every 5 years?
5 would be normal.
Normal. Thank you.
So if we put funding in for all the various positions that have been requested, we effectively reduce the funding available for other requests in the budget because we have to balance the thing. So just a caution there. If we simply put in funding for every request that everybody makes, we break the budget before we get started. So.
Point noted.
Just to clarify, Eric had submitted $13,000 for an increase in contracted services. So you have 13,000 listed here, which is that same amount. So
I was proposing to move that to 25, but I don't know if contracted service includes the Jackson firm or Summit Law, which is what I would prefer, and Kevin. I don't know what it includes, so.
I could work with you to figure that out. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know right off. But the dollar amount though stays the same. So the only two additional requests that you have are the 25,000 for the FML administrator and then 200,000 for a reclassification salary survey.
Contracted service, I would change to 25, and I would,
55 right now. It's 55 right now.
it's 55,000?
Correct.
I think about 48 of that is the Wesley contract.
55,000 right now plus 13,000 requests. So 68 is what the request is for next year.
Oh, I see, okay, all right. Yeah, go ahead and keep that, that's fine for now.
Okay.
Advertising, like I say, very, very questionable. That amount seems really very, very low from what I'm used to. But I need to get a handle on that.
And you don't have an amount that you would estimate that you would need for advertising right now?
20,000, but I don't want to blow the budget.
Okay.
We also did career fairs, we would do attend diversity career fairs. We had equipment that we took with us. It was a lot more expensive than just running a little tiny ad.
Right.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really big jump when you first hear it, but when you consider the cost of a consulting firm to do a search for whether it's the county administrator or the HR director or any key management position, those run anywhere from $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a piece. So $25,000, as difficult as it may seem, or as much of an increase it may seem, that being very conservative to.
It'd be saving us money in the long run.
Oh, absolutely.
Mr. Davidson.
I just want to kind of concur with the thoughts as him. Keith and him and I have had major discussions. She's been on the job, so both of us, so new. And one of the things that have really shocked me, and I know we've had these discussions, that I really found kind of profound coming into this job was the sheer number of these grade reclasses that were coming. They're usually viewed as being much more rigid compared to a study done. It's been 5 years since we've done a study, and I think that with this new study, we'll be able to bring down that level of activity to a once-a-year type of a thing, make it a lot more of a thought process. I think that I just want to concur that I think that that is a really, I know it's a hefty price, and hopefully we'll be able to come in lower than we're giving you ballpark projection right at this point, but hopefully we'll be able to come in with lower than that, but but it's much, much needed, I think. We're due anyway, it's 5 years. And Keith, did you want to say? And sorry, we'll revise this sheet. We were having discussions about this up until just 10 minutes before we came up here, Keith and Jim. So, this is just because, so we'll revise this sheet and have it in front of the board promptly. So.
Okay.
Right, and there was some discussion about people who may be overpaid. Well, usually when you do a salary review like that, the whole chart is going to shift, so that may free some people for a year or two if they were overpaid, if that's what the result has been. The whole idea is to get everything, aligned with the market.
And sometimes if it's found by the survey that they're grossly overpaid, sometimes there's different methods of solving that. Sometimes those people are, the term I like to use is grandfathered. I don't know if that's appropriate anymore, but in there until it's filled again, and then it will go to that new amount,
Right.
But we can deal with all that in a future date. That probably doesn't really need to be discussed now.
Okay, well, that would have been my question, because how do you ask somebody to take a cut and pay,
Normally, you just, you wait till they
leave,
you
or
retire
move forward? Okay, thank you.
or move, yeah.
I don't have any other comments.
Is there any more questions? Thank you very much.
Welcome.
So at this time, we have a break scheduled, a 10-minute break at 10:46, and we're right there. So we'll recess for 10 minutes.
to me like it was white. White and big was dark colored.
We have come back from recess and reconvened the meeting. We're moving to planning and building, planning and development. Mr. Bratton, Mr. Erdman, Keith Johnson. Oh, okay. Yep.
For planning and building, we are expecting a pretty sharp decrease in our projected revenues based on the housing. Everything at the start of 2022 looked great, and then we just, our department, well, not us, but building, construction, really just,
11.
it was one thing after another. I think it's going to stay relatively consistent. I think it'll be numbers closer to what we experienced maybe in 19 or 20. We have lots available, but it's the construction costs and the mortgages. Issues are waiting, folks are, I think, going to, based on my past experience when it comes to development over time, when we have these types of shakeups to the market, they tend to take about a year or so, as long as nothing changes, to kind of stabilize out for folks to figure out exactly what they can and cannot do. We're still in that flex period, and that usually is going to go for at least 3 to 6 months, assuming nothing new pops up. Based on that, we're projecting a revenue decrease of about $200,000 in building. Planning, though, we expect to be probably pretty consistent. In these times, this is usually often when your land activities will continue, because those are pretty static costs. They don't have an increase or anything. We'll also be, we're seeking a few things with regard to the just minor modifications to the actual budget lines. One being that the auditor's office has asked that we track the excess revenues from building to ensure that they're reinvested back into the building department. So in that vein, we've requested the creation of a new BARS code that will just, at the end of the year, it'll be an end of the year carryover. If there's any excess revenues for building, that would be carried over for building. That amount, if, would be reduced off. But that way the the state auditors are able to track where those excess revenues are. They're being reinvested back in to the building department. Obviously, anything that comes in the front would be reduced in the ask for the following year. So first we would look at what building has and roll it. Now, that said, we don't expect there to be a rollover this year. We do expect that line item to be flat. We don't expect it to roll over. Then with county cell phones, notice that the planning department had $600 allocated. We basically reduced that, or requested to reduce that to $150. I'm the only one in planning that uses my phone for person or business calls. And I don't seek reimbursement for that, but I don't know if at some point we may need to get another phone or something. So I'd like to keep at least some dollars in that account, but not the 600. There's a $50 request for fees and memberships to maintain our certifications, and that's just due to the fact that we have a few more certs or memberships that we have to pay for, as well as there's been some minor increases in some of the certification rates. And then, again, I don't know, we got the Shoreline Master Program grant from Washington Department of Ecology in the amount of $84,000. We're not going to use that up until next year, that this is ongoing. To date, when I've prepared the budget, $5,485 have been spent towards it. At the end, when the product is due, by June 30th. By then, the funds will be gone. So it is a one-time just through next year, and it's a grant dollar amount. So that's fully funded by the Department of Ecology. And I'm happy to ask or answer any questions if there's any specific items.
Questions?
If I can just, I'm still not quite sure I followed along. I know you were talking about it, but the 2022 working budget was 650, and now we're decreasing it.
That's the expected revenues from construction,
Yeah.
effectively, yeah.
Yeah, and the budgeted revenues from that is low. Can you explain that one more time for me?
For the reduction?
Yes.
It's due to what's going on in the market. Our building has tapered off significantly. We've had a combination of increased construction costs, increased costs due to regulation, and then the mortgage change going from 3% to nearly 7% now has really just rippled through the whole market, and effectively, at this moment, building has almost effectively stopped. I can't say it's stopped, but we've seen a severe reduction in new applications at this time. My expectation is that will start to pick up again once folks, what we're dealing with right now is, I'll call it a hangover from, so you've got people that were in various stages of their process.
Right.
Some of those are out, some of them are pausing, some of them are trying to figure out, can they still move forward, and we're still in that flux period.
I got that part about the slowdown. I guess it's kind of like a question Commissioner Peck was asking earlier about methodology. So I understand just how much different it is right now. How do we wind up on the number that you did?
Oh, okay. What I use is a 5-year average. So I go through, I'll go back 5 years. We pretty consistently come up with, and we have consistently come up with around 450,000 in revenue. But then there's seasonal or yearly shifts depending on what's going on the ground. For example, if I've got a lot of vacant lots all of a sudden, then it's highly likely that those are going to build. That's kind of what we projected the budget on last year. And that was going. Everything was clipping along. Then all these things in the housing sector hit. And so that caused me to do an adjustment based on what we're normally seeing as far as those numbers coming in and what we can realistically project off of that. And that's where I came up with the 400,000. And it's still within that 400. I'm having hope that in the spring that we will see that system kind of stabilize out and we'll start seeing more building come
You feel
on
pretty
in.
confident about that number, so that's good. I know it's always a guess, but
Yes, I think that we should be able to hit that number. To hit what we had this year was a pretty dramatic shock. I mean, the county has consistently gone up, and right now, I forgot to grab my latest numbers, I think we're around 300,000 in revenue.
I appreciate that. It's a big dollar amount, so that's why I asked, right?
There's also a real inconsistency in the revenue on a given permit. Under the GMA, there's a huge push for multifamily entry levels. It's whether or not it changes the landscape of our construction here, I think is too soon to tell. But we've had an awful lot of large lot, single-family, high-dollar homes, 500,000 to 800,000, disproportionately high in the last few years, and that has really pushed our numbers up. If that nature of housing should shift, and I think it is, and money gets expensive, it has, I think you're in the neighborhood. It's a pretty big drop, but not real optimistic on what this looks like next year
Not
or
for
two.
next year, I'm not, but we'll know more, come fall or late summer, early fall of next year. That will as far as what's going to be happening in 4. Again, a lot of it ripples down, so anything that happens in the DC takes about 3 months, it seems for me to see it on the ground when it comes to rate increases and changes.
You're at 357,000 right now.
Yeah. So we're estimating, I figure, within the next month or so, we'll probably get, if we're lucky, another 50,000 in revenue coming in. And it depends, when we start pulling in, say, large-scale commercial projects, those types of things, processing plants, if those show up, there's going to be, those are very high earners, I guess you could say, as compared to, say, market rate or even first-time home buyer revenues. Places in the 250 to 300,000. But as Commissioner Peck stated, our average build in the rural areas is in the 5 to 1 million range. Generally, they don't quite break a million.
Plus 5 to millions, 5 to 8 now.
Yeah, 5 to 8. Oh, okay. It's now 5 to 8.
So the other thing we need to keep in mind is as these big plants come on, some of these are done under the new TIF laws, the tax increment financing. And those revenues are not going to flow to us, they're going to flow to paying for bonds. So keep in mind that when those big projects come online, it's not necessarily going to help this number.
Yeah, it's not, see, I like it when this is really fat, and then the next section is very thin. But unfortunately, it's the market we're in right now. But I do believe it'll be temporary.
Any other questions?
Derek, do you have a cost line in here? We're getting to expenditures now for your professional services. Is that 4,100?
It's 12,000 in building, if I remember right, and 12,000 in planning.
So,
And then on top, and then there's also the $84,000 grant that doesn't show up on a line here, but I think we need to account for it for this year.
that's for the shoreline plan contract work?
Correct, yeah. The other stuff is for on-call and work in assistance with our zoning update and finalization of our subdivision code update. So there's some, and then occasionally, though we haven't really done it a lot. Mike Troidel, our building official, has done a real good job of not having to utilize our third-party inspection service. But again, we like to keep those at that rate because we do tend to, on average, use close to that amount on call. But again, it depends on specifically what's going on. So in building, it's 12,000 and I have it as, did I carry over 28,000? And
For your building lease?
no, for my professional services and planning,
You had a 12.5, which is same as this year.
I do for building, but in planning, I have 28,000. That is potentially can be reduced. I apologize for that. I can look at that and see if that number can come down. But it's also, we only use it if needed.
Are we using any of those services for the GMA update?
That's what, yeah, but not, I don't know what I was doing when I saw that. That number was for a different situation, basically to help cover what happened with my, or, I don't know why it shouldn't be 28,000.
Yeah, I'm just
20,000 is
asking
more
if,
appropriate.
given the challenge to our plan, our update, our GMA update, are we going to be using contracted services to help respond to
I hadn't
that
thought of-
challenge?
I didn't really think about who's paying the legal, whether that's coming out of my budget or the PA's office. Based on that, I would request that we leave that alone now,
well,
just
that's-
to be on the safe side. Yeah, I didn't think about that coming directly out of planning's budget to pay for the, and also, yes, Ms. Stickney is assisting us.
Yeah.
And we get billed for that.
So it's not legal work, it's professional
yeah.
services to provide plan updates and reviews.
Derek, I just wanted to, the ecology grant carryover, so is any of that going to be received in 2023, or is it all expected to be in 2022? Because we have it as a 2023 budget line right now, but should that be there?
Yeah, it's, they didn't write us a check. It's, as I get the bills, I send them over to ecology and then
The
they.
reimbursement? Have you reimbursed any of that this year? Do you expect to?
I am, yeah, I
How
will
much of
be
the total this year?
About 7,000. So that's what, on here, at the point I did this, at the time I did this, we'd done 5,485 in bills. I have to submit those for my quarterly report this quarter. So those will be going in. I think we just got another one for $650, something like
So none of the expenditure lines need to be increased related to this? This is just additional money you're getting?
Yes, this 84,000 was granted this year, but it will also pay for all of the SMP work going through 23,
So
which
you
is
got-
due 6 months.
Yeah. So you got 78.5 of that 84 program for next year because you're not going to obviously use it all this year.
Correct.
Okay. So that number for next year, the 78,000 out of the 84, you think is about right?
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
the quote came in at that rate. That's all AHBL's going to be
Okay.
charging us
All right.
on that piece. They do other planning stuff for us as well.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. I think if we're done here, we'll move on to Mr. Killian, the county clerk. Thank you. And what tab are we on this one?
Next tab over, 12.
12.
Just in case.
Because
Thank you.
put me on the leg. People will sort of give the message.
Thank you.
Changes.
Not that I'm aware of.
Can I just ask a question for clarification for all
Yes.
board members? So we just had a discussion a little bit ago. I don't think the clerk was here to hear about the possibility of a salary study. And that would affect a lot of record. I mean,
Yes.
you guys' vision that would have a lot of effect on.
They do have a request in for the regrading of 12 positions of theirs.
I just thought I'd throw that out there for a discussion.
Yeah.
Rather than we just go in a whole bunch of discussion and then.
Yeah, well, without getting off track or belaboring the point, I said at the start of this, we need to do a salary study, not do these one-off, because we will have, before we know it, 36 or more lined up, and that's exactly where we are now. And if we're going to do the study, then, yeah, these all need to, they all need to go into the study.
And when would this study happen?
I'm sorry, Mike, you weren't here for the conversation.
Right.
It was during an HR presentation. The study was going to try to, we'll try to commence it as soon as possible, as soon as we have the direction, and selection of the firm would be crucial, and guessing estimates are, I mean, I'm be pulling things out of the air because I don't know. We haven't even consulted anybody, but I would imagine it would as we possibly could, be a matter of months. Guarantee you it would be done as expedient as possible. I'm getting hand signals from HR and back, and what was that number? Do it again in my vision. She would know more. She's had more direct experience in this, so that and knowing Sam like I do, I think she's giving the worst case.
Okay, and so what's that going to encompass? Because we've been working on this since January and keep, hold off, but then we've seen all these other ones come in and get approved without, some with comp studies, some without comp studies. So that's my concern, is that, we've lost, probably had turnover this year of 35% of my staff going to other jobs in the county or to Benton County or other municipalities because they're paid higher.
Well, I totally understand, and I only brought this up,
Right.
not to put you on, because you're the elected official, you can come and you can continue to even talk about this as far as.
Right.
I just knew that you weren't in the room.
Right.
When we had a major discussion, and I thought that you should know what was said before you went on here and not even be told, so.
Right, well, I appreciate that.
And still present.
Okay.
So,
Anyway.
Mr. Killian?
So we can go ahead and, so overall, our budget in the 116, there's not much change whatsoever in that budget. I don't know if Tim sees any red flags, but it's pretty much the same as it has been in the past several years. I do have a question about the Blake LFO reimbursement line as to why that's in my budget.
That's one that actually I think is ultimately going to be adjusted out probably to I know there's some rulings from the state auditor's office, or rulings is probably a bad word, but where they had said, there was a couple different scenarios depending on how your prosecutor felt about them, whether they figured whether the prosecutor thought they were the county's liability or the state's liability. You were supposed to account for them in two different ways, and one of them was in a separate fund, I think. And so ultimately, I think they are going to be moved out. It just hasn't been yet, but it was ultimately just looking at the resolution that was approved before without any other guidance than that, and just trying to figure out where they fit in. And a lot of the costs seemed like it was your cost because it was related to reimbursements, but then there's some other costs too related to salaries and benefits potentially. And so it was actually split up between prosecutor and clerk, but not to say it was perfect. And ultimately, I think it's going to be adjusted out.
Okay, because that makes my bottom line look like, over $1 million, and I'm not collecting any of that money myself, so. We are putting in reimbursement for our staff time, though, with the state. So we are doing that, but those would go back into salaries once we receive those. I don't know if you have any questions about the 160 revenue. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward.
Huge loss of Blake revenue.
That's down here.
Any questions? Okay, no questions?
Okay, we can go to the courthouse facilitator, 116. I am asking for an increase in professional services from 17,465 to 25,000 because we're renegotiating our clerk and court facilitator contract. She hasn't had an increase in pay since 2006. So she's going to go, that's going to be brought before the board December 6th to go from $55 an hour to $75. And that program is paid for by itself. None of the money comes out of current expense. And if you don't have any questions on that, then we can go to the 117, the clerk LFO collection, and this is the grant funding that we receive twice a year from the state, and it's based on criminal filing fees.
Any questions on the 117?
We added these couple of LFO collection positions several years ago. And you promised at the time that if these positions didn't pay for themselves with increased collections, that you would do away with them. What's the status on that balance between collections and the cost of those positions?
Well, this year, we've collected year-to-date almost 63,000 in that line item. We budgeted
These are
153.
for the additional positions now, not your one you already had.
Correct.
So your 63 is the total, and how many people do you have? Do you have two?
Those,
So the collections really wouldn't even pay for the one, let alone both.
well, they've also taken on other duties due to increased court commissioners, judges. They're handling our daily ex parte and preliminary docket. They're actually working on wage assignments, which are garnishments, which brings in revenue to the county as well. Speak to some of the other duties that they're
Yeah,
handling as
so
well.
they were hired to do,
Pardon me?
they were hired to do LFO's financial collections, and that was the basis for it. And so what I'm hearing you say is you didn't have enough collections to pay for them, so you've just put them into service in other areas.
They're taking on additional duties. So we haven't had to ask for any new positions. They've taken on some of the other duties that the court has put on the clerk's office.
Yeah, so I appreciate and respect the fact that you didn't have them just sitting with nothing to do. You had them productively working, so the county was getting value for what we were paying. But it's probably one of the issues that needs to be looked at in a broader study, is to make sure that the positions that you have are the right ones for the work to be
Right.
done. Because you did say that if those LFOs didn't pay for those positions, you would come to us and remove them.
And also add that Clerks Association is working with the AOC and some other members, depending on how the election turns out, to do a study of the last 3 years in collections and ask for a budget proviso that would increase this funding. So since the LFOs are going down, we're still doing the work, but we can't collect as much because of the court costs that are being not imposed. So if that is,
We've been begging the state for years just to pay us more for indigent defense, and aren't willing to do that either, so.
well, we actually have a pretty good idea that this might work in a proviso in the
Okay.
state budget.
I hope it does.
I hope it does too.
Okay, with, guess that concludes it. We're done with the 117. Is there anything else you want to add, Mr. Gillian?
I think we should talk about the request for our staff to be reclassified and bumped up due to their duties. And so we put together, and everyone has a copy of the, our court office unique and elevated responsibilities that were not encompassed in the original reclassification that was done in 2018.
I just want to make it clear that we have 12 very hardworking deputy clerks in our office. They're very hardworking people that are held to a very high standard doing the work of the Superior Court in many areas, and we outlined the most important ones in the summary that we provided you. We can answer any questions you have on this, or we could go over a few things, but I'd like just for you to know that, others are working remotely and maybe having a change in responsibilities through COVID. Our people were all frontliners coming in every day, working harder because of the changes we experienced in COVID. Multiple emergency orders coming from the Supreme Court and the Superior Court, all having to be implemented immediately, scrambling to get WebEx up and going, changing courtroom responsibilities, elevating the stress level of all these people that kept coming in and working harder and harder and harder and continue to. And I just want to advocate for them. It's very difficult for them to see other positions being added, other positions being bumped up, and they continue to work their hearts out. Very little downtime in our office between facing the public, all the data entry that comes in on all of these case types, and then they also change hats for passports and bring in $90,000 of revenue to date already this year. And then they're also going into the courtroom and supporting the judges. Multiple dockets. We have over 10 additional dockets added due to COVID that haven't gone away. They just work harder and harder and harder, and they just keep having to wait and wait and wait for compensation. Some can wait, and we're very grateful for them. Some we've lost.
Many
because
we've lost.
they've gone to another job with lower responsibilities and less demands, less professionalism, easier, more pay. I am here to advocate for the people that are staying with us and continue to just work hard and be loyal. And then we have to start again and train more people, and off they go. And it's a shame. And we wanted to make sure our materials that we provided for you today made it more clear to you the job that we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
I have a question. Mike, I think you said 30% of your staff is turned over. Is that just this year? Or is that within the last few years, or?
How many did we lose this year? We lost 2 in a week.
Do you conduct formal exit interviews with those employees that are leaving to try to determine why they're leaving?
Yeah, and most of them, it's for money. I mean, I can't compete with someone going to Hanford getting paid $25,000 more. One went to OPD, the new position. So yeah, I would say 30% this year we've lost.
Please come up to the mic so our HR director is.
That's consistent with the county, who lost about a third in turnover in the last year.
You have 7 steps in your scale.
We do. Yes. They're on the union scale. But again, them seeing the other departments getting, you know, these increases without some comp studies, some not. Some are easier to reclassify than others. That's why the highlighted portion are things that we do, but was not in the original comp study from 2018. Even though we explained these things to the consultant, they really don't understand what type of work we actually do. I think a lot of people think, well, if you're not having a jury trial, you're not busy, or all you do is just put a piece of paper in a file. Well, there's much more complexity and liability to the county than many people think. Any other questions? So I have a question. Is this going to be a bottom-up study, a top-down study? Is it going to look at every job that was already reclassified?
All right, to our director. This is what she's proposing for us to do for the courthouse.
Yes, it would be for all non-rep, you call them non-bargaining positions. And these are done every 5 years, so you're due now.
All non-bargaining?
All non-rep.
Well, it would be bargaining too.
Not in a union. I'm not dealing with any union positions.
These are union positions.
Yeah, these are
All
all,
yours are union? Oh,
Yes.
okay, I did not understand that. The only, this study that I'm proposing is only for non-bargaining.
no.
That's the only type I've ever done. Let me put it that way. Because the union dictates what their
No,
comparables are.
no, we'll have to have a discussion about that because it has to be, because otherwise what we just told them is incorrect because their positions are all union.
Correct.
No, it would have to be a complete county assessment.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I've done both.
Yeah.
But I've hired a consultant. to
I'm
do
glad
it.
that this came up, and yeah, because, yeah, and it's good, and I also want to say that we just discussed this morning, so the board hasn't made a decision about this yet. So it's proper that you bring these things forward, because they should be part of the budget discussion if we don't decide to do the study, but it might, yeah, rest assured, it would be comprehensive, because most employees of the county are union, and so, yeah.
I should just add, for all the bargaining units that I've worked with in the past, I've done the compensation study. Non-reps, we've hired a consultant to do that. But it doesn't mean we couldn't hire the consultant to do it. It's just about 90 non-reps. So, yeah. Thank you for that clarification.
No, it would be countywide.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Okay.
So, having heard that, is that going to extend out the time frame as far as when this comp study will be done? And the only reason why I'm asking is because sitting here, I'm thinking of, you know, there was a few positions that we lost, and I'm sure we're not the only office in the county that's going through this, but, and those employees were thinking that, elected didn't come here and fight in that, you know, or not fight, but present things like this. And so having seen what has happened in the past year, you know, of other positions getting bumped up, and then that gets brought to our management team that, you know, well, there's, what are you guys doing, you know, to increase our salaries? What are you doing? There. And so we come today with all of this broke down to show the responsibilities and the liabilities that our employees, you know, are doing. And then we're going back with, sorry, again, you know. So my question is, how long will that take? Because will they have to wait another year? Because I foresee more people leaving. And it's sad, because I also see that there's more jobs in the county that are available that are more money an hour for these jobs, and less responsibility. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean as far as like the, you know, it's all broke down here. But I foresee how long will that take? Because we're,
The first thing will be whether we are going to do the study. Okay, we haven't made that decision. Things are being presented, we're listening, and then we're going to make decisions after discussion. So it's one of those things where it's been proposed to do the study, and it's been 5 years. I think a study would, because your evaluation may even be higher than your evaluation of the position. We don't know yet until we have a comprehensive study done, and since I've been here, there hasn't been one done.
and I guess the only reason why I mean, like I just said, but I know I believe our last one took at least a year, am I right?
About 2 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's kind of scary because we spend a lot of time and money on
Training.
training, you know, so
Yeah,
I
it
feel like
takes
we
a,
got a good group.
The last study was done largely in-house, if I recall. And it was done on a part-time basis. What HR director has proposed is that we hire an outside firm who specializes in this particular work and has estimated that it's months, not years. And I know if you hire a competent contractor and you pay them accordingly, you know, it's whether they bring 2 people to do a study or a team of 10 determines whether you can do this in 6 months or 3 months. So it can be done quickly. It's a matter of, 1, commitment to do it, 2, willingness to fund what it takes to do it. And I'll tell you, you know, this train left the station several months ago. We could already have this study done if we had done this then. Kicking this can down the alley any further now might solve your problem, but there's other departments that are going to be behind you who are then going to have to wait for yours to be done and then somebody else's to be done. So I don't personally think there's any way to avoid doing a comprehensive study. I didn't agree with doing the one-offs that we've already done, so I'm not going to own that. But we shouldn't procrastinate any further. We need to do it, we need to commit the resources, and we need to commit enough resources to do this quickly.
Do you have an idea when that decision will be made?
The end of this budget, when they, and I can assure you, Mike, for the time period that I'm here, I'll be part of this selection process. I'll be in full communication with you, and I'll try to make this as expedient as we possibly can and convey to the contractor that there is market forces. I've joined the Washington Association of County Administrators discussions, you know, Zoom calls in here. This is going throughout the entire state, that they're all losing people to the private industry. This is a real problem that local government has, a very real problem. And I think that this comprehensive study is the way that we actually take the boat out of the water, put it on dry dock, and fix the entire hull rather than patching leaks that we've been doing. And we actually, this is the best route. So we've known each other for a long time, and I'll just give you my word, we'll make it as expedient as we can.
I appreciate that.
And know that there was one department that was done in, and that was approved in last year's budget.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions?
Any other questions?
Nope.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you.
And next, we'll move down to the district court.
What'd Jerry say?
We call it move it up.
That's what I see.
You're going to say that, you have to sing it.
Morning.
What tab are we on here, Tim?
That is tab 17.
17, tab 17.
Just to take it off the table, we have 2 clerks who are presently rated as 12s, and we believe that they should be raised to 13s, but it sounds like that is something that's going to be discussed in the future. We want to just put it out there so we're well aware of that. How would you like to proceed?
Well, just any changes in your primary budget, do you have any big changes?
We do have one increase, interpreter funding, Tim, that I didn't submit with the budget. We just received the notification on how much.
This is funding reimbursement through the state, and there is a particular number that is suggested, and then we respond to them, and they allocate back to us.
So it must be this right here, the
Interpreter?
Washington State AOC District Court Interpreter.
Probably just half of that since
Yeah,
it's.
that's what I'm gonna say.
So without going through a bunch of these line by line, I just noticed that your, it looks like your total revenue in the 126 is going from 928,000 to 744. And I'm just curious, are some of these the results of program or state changes where you're no longer collecting these for some reason?
They are. The biggest challenge that we face in our courts are, in our court, are the trends that are occurring regarding collection, imposition of fines and collection of fines, fees, and costs. Judges Conference, a couple of judges who were speaking that were from the other side of the mountains stated that if the individual standing in front of them qualifies for court-appointed attorney, is indigent, they do not impose any fines, fees, or costs. 2 or 3 judges said that right in the conference we were in. That is not the approach that this court has taken. We impose basic fines. We inquire regarding whether or not people are competent, capable of working, and whether or not they're capable of paying. We impose some fines. Occasionally, there are times when nothing is imposed because of the programs they're on, their disability, or other things. At other times, we impose some fine, $50, and there can be probation costs, and then they are always subject to review, and we let people know that on the record. They then, so we start out at that place, so some people no fines, some full fines, depending on their ability to pay. Then when people get in the situation down the road, or something that occurred years ago that they've been unable to pay, we have a process where they submit a petition to the court requesting for a reduction or a waiver of past fines, fees, and costs. Again, we are mandated to respond to those and make appropriate adjustments, and the court has done that. That results in forgiveness of matters or amounts that are in collection or amounts that aren't yet in collection but are unpaid due to the financial situation these people find themselves in. That is not going away, and if I understand it correctly, civil infraction amounts are also going to be hit more heavily by that in the future. Assessed and going to be assessed in the future, and the way they're shared when they come in. That's, that's kind of a general overview. I don't have the specifics as to the numbers, but it's going to continue to affect our ability to impose fines and collect them.
Let me repeat back what I think I heard you say. And if I
was trained as a lawyer. Go ahead.
If I minimize it too much, let me know. You've got roughly a 20% reduction in projected revenues, and you're going to have the privilege of doing all the work that you've been doing years past, no significant reduction in roles, responsibilities, obligations, just a 20% reduction in revenue predicated on a lot of the wisdom imparted to us from Olympia.
I think you've stated it. It actually, let me see. There have been some statutes passed that have also required us to not impose filing fees even. Things such as name changes, harassment or unlawful harassment cases in situations. We didn't in the past if it was appropriate. But, you know, as legislation imposes that, it makes the requests increase as well. So that will have some effect, who knows how much. That just has happened, started, I think, September 1st maybe. But we are seeing that already, and we will see more. Another thing that has been discussed here in prior years is that there has been an ongoing effort that's now suspended, but for 3 or 4 years, and maybe it's not suspended, to move to electronic filing. So, for example, attorneys, collection agencies, instead of submitting stacks of documents that our staff then has to go through, collate, organize, put into files, or not now anymore, we scan them and destroy them. The intent was to have people do that all electronically, attorneys and collection agencies and others from their office. That bumped along, and we were supposed to go live with that. Was it this past August, or was it? Yeah, this past August. And I'm not sure exactly why, but it failed because of objection by some individuals, attorneys, or entities.
The municipal and district courts are going on a new case management system, and one of the components will be online e-filing, but the project's being pushed back, so until that's being pushed back, so.
And we don't really know how far it's being pushed back at this point either. If that was to occur, I always was of the hope that it could result in some reduction in power in our court, the individuals that are sitting at desks. That hasn't happened. It's not going to happen in the foreseeable future. So our needs, the staff that we have, I think when I became judge, we had 13 staff. It's at 9 now. They're all cross-trained. They work extremely well together. I don't think that we could be any more efficient presently. And with the issues we've had with different individuals being out for COVID and other things, because of cross coverage, we've been pretty good as far as filling gaps when they arise. Certainly not overstaffed.
So the software you're referring to is not in any way connected with the Odyssey or the program to clerk, totally separate. I'm pretty sure of that. And
they speak to each other, I think.
It's the same vendor.
Same vendor, okay, well, whether they speak to one another or not, I guess we'll find out. But is that product available now, soon to be available? And do we have any idea what the cost would be and who's going to bear that cost?
The pilot courts are just starting, and so next year we should have an estimate on our implementation, but I would say probably not till 2024.
And would that
So
be?
next year we would present any cost.
Have you heard any rumors about cost? Are we talking a few $100,000? Are we talking $1 million? Don't know.
And
Okay.
were there discussions of us having to incur costs if this hadn't been discontinued and if it had been put in place? All that.
No.
I thought it was all going to be at the state level in the past. I mean, there was never, we as judges were never told, get ready for this cost coming down the road when we implement this program. I never heard that, so I'm not sure it isn't all being taken care of at the state, but I don't know that for a fact. There are some counties that have put in their own systems. Yakima did. Yakima District Court. They put it in a number of years ago. I spoke with one of the judges up there. It's a system that will not probably speak to the system that is going to be put in place by the state. And I asked him how they were able to get it done, and he said the commissioners needed some space that we were storing files in. And so they were able to do something for us so that we could give them this 1,000 square feet of space or whatever they needed. So, and that's practically why I think things have happened in the past.
Okay, ask a question. With the reduction in fine revenue is very obvious from political reasons, and Judge, you basically said that we don't see changes in that political climate. There may be even further down the road. So the 20% budgeted lower expectations in fine revenue, I know you guys put a lot of thought into the budget, and I'm not implying that you put it together, but is that reasonable? I mean, maybe it should even be lower?
I don't know, in part because I'm not going to be sitting in that chair next year. As the district court judge, you have discretion of how much to impose, for example, on traffic citations. And because of the revenue sharing, the first $80-some doesn't end up in our county. And so, you know, that's, you never go below that amount is kind of what conference discussions are. But again, that amount may even not be collected in the future, depending on
who's sitting in your chair.
Well, and what's imposed from the
okay.
And then as far as above that, discretionary with the judge, and the number of citations this year is up from last year. But that fluctuates wildly too, looking back over the past 10, 15 years. A lot more citations issued than others, and I have no control over the State Patrol or the Department of Fish and Game or the Sheriff's Office.
Yeah.
Or the behavior of drivers. Another thing that's affected, well, excuse me, we're still in district court, so I won't go ahead yet.
What's that?
No other questions on
Is-
this?
no, I don't think there's
they're
any other
waiting for
questions,
direction to move
so
on.
please continue.
Moving on to the probation department. Probation department, take a look at where it was this year and what our expectation was. We fell short. And part of the reason for that, contributing factor, is that cases that are not resolved with findings of guilt or guilty pleas are resolved through often what's called a stipulated order of continuance or deferral. And what those are arrangements where the individual who's charged with the offense is required to do certain things, and if they're successful in doing those things, the case would be dismissed or the charge reduced, and then fines and fees and costs. The monitoring costs of those are different than they are for probation, less than they are for probation. The term can be less, although in certain instances, well, no, it can be less, so that you have less revenue there. And what's the third thing? something slipped my mind. But in any event, that has an effect on our revenue. So our probation amounts are shrinking as well. All differently. It's beneficial for the county because rather than putting people in jail, you're running them, we are requiring them to complete certain programs, and it's about behavior modification, and it works very well in the felony diversion program. We have like a 95% success rate. It doesn't work quite as well in the percentages aren't as good in the misdemeanor and gross misdemeanor charges, but it's an effort that benefits many and is successful, results in success.
Any other questions?
So 16% reduction in revenue and probation and all the same roles, responsibilities, workload.
Yes, there is some reduced, well, not reduced, the way those cases are resolved, our probation department will monitor probation for up to 2 years on some, 1 year for others, and then depending on how they are resolved, it may result in a 2-year informal probation after that, and our probation department is not being compensated for that. And so we have told the prosecutor's office they will do that, and they've agreed that if they want that deal, they will do that. So we don't need to monitor that portion. So we're getting everything staying the same, but that's a kind of a
I think we still have trial court, right?
Trial court next.
And we're still got to go through the trial court
Yep.
improvement fund. This doesn't look like it's had any changes to it.
No.
Are we good with the trial
We
court?
good? Any comments about this?
The only thing that I would mention, and I don't know where this is, I think it has to go through the salary commission, but the wage for my position, salary, something crossed my desk. I'm making, and I don't recall exactly, 192. If I'm making $192,000 or $194,000 a year, the estimate, if the salary commission adopts what was in the paper, would kick it up to 207 next year and 213 or 14 the year after that. So that's something coming down the road. I don't know where that is. I glanced at the article, but I didn't. So but that would have an effect on the second half of next year's budget because those normally start July 1st.
Okay.
Okay.
That only would affect your salary.
Yes, and the Superior Court judges would have something similar as well.
Okay.
And the superior and the prosecuting attorney's salary's tied to
Yes.
that, right? So
They're tied to
If
it
it's
too.
it's
tied
all
to that,
got a
yeah.
domino effect. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the majority of the elected officials were recently tied to the district court salary.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, so was it, okay.
Yes, Superior Court.
You said the majority of elected officials.
The non-commissioner electeds.
Yes, that's who I was referring to.
Okay.
All righty. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that,
Have a good day.
that's the conclusion for, until we'll conclude, we'll recess until 1:15.